In today's video, I thought we'd go through every single starting quarterback in the SEC and rank them 1 through 14. Can't really be any more clear with what today's video is about, so let's just get started. At number 14, we have Luke Doty out of South Carolina. He's the kind of guy who could move up the list a little bit, but I think South Carolina is going to have a lot of problems, and he is arguably the least experienced quarterback in today's video. Doty was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, as he was from Myrtle Beach, and had a really good high school career, as he had over 7,000 yards and 83 touchdowns. He decided to commit to the South Carolina Gamecocks over the likes of Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, and Virginia Tech. He was the number 6 dual threat quarterback in the nation and a 4-star recruit, and it was a huge get for Will Muschamp. Unfortunately, he'd be stuck behind both Colin Hill and Ryan Hilinski, but after some quarterback issues, Doty would actually get a chance to play in 8 games as a freshman. He'd make 2 starts and had a total of 405 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. Not exactly the best numbers in the world. He started his first game against Georgia and his second game against Kentucky, and he really looked like he needed more time to develop and get better before he should be a starter. They'll be under first-year head coach Shane Beamer going into 2021, but he should have the starting job, as the 2 other guys on the roster, Jason Brown and Colton Gauthier, really don't intrigue me that much, and Doty was a big-time recruit coming out of high school, so I think he will be the starter, and as of right now, he's number 14. At number 13, I have a guy who I am really high on, and I do think will be really good in the long-term game, but as of right now, it's hard to rank him above other guys. It's KJ Jefferson from Arkansas. Coming out of North Panola High School in the state of Mississippi, Jefferson was a consensus 4-star recruit. He committed to Arkansas over the likes of Missouri and Texas A&M, but also had offers from other schools such as Georgia, Ole Miss, and Kentucky. He originally committed to Chad Morris, but of course he stuck around for Sam Pittman. He's been seen as the future for a while, and as a freshman in 2019, he would play in 3 games and even start 1. That first start came against LSU, but it wasn't exactly a great performance. In 2020, Felipe Franks came in from Florida and kind of took his spot, but Jefferson was a solid player as a backup. Against Missouri, he'd put his name out there and show that he was the future of the team, as he'd have 274 yards and 3 touchdowns, and also 32 yards and a touchdown on the ground in a close loss against Missouri. He had the most passing yards by a Razorback freshman quarterback since 2008, and has showed a glimpse of the kind of player that he can be. He's someone who can throw the ball and run the ball, and he'll be really exciting in Sam Pittman's offense, and especially throwing the ball to Treylon Burks and some of the other weapons they have. Right now, they say there is a quarterback battle between him and Malik Hornsby, but in no world do I think that KJ Jefferson does not start this year. I expect him to be pretty solid this year, but I really think he'll become a star in the next 2 years. Arkansas fans are going to want to cut my head off for having him ranked this low, but in terms of what he has done so far, it's hard to rank him any higher than 13. At number 12, we have one of the more intriguing and unknown quarterbacks in the SEC, and that is Jack Abraham. He will more than likely be the starter for Mississippi State this fall, and Will Rogers will have something to say about that, but I do believe that Abraham's talent and experience will beat Rogers out to start the year. In case you don't know who Jack Abraham is, he became an absolute star for Southern Miss over the last few years, as in 2019, he threw for nearly 3,500 yards and 19 touchdowns for the Southern Miss Eagles. Mike Leach has a track record of developing good quarterbacks with guys such as Luke Falk, Gardner Minshew, and Anthony Gordon. Unfortunately, the KJ Costello experiment did not work out, and Will Rogers got his feet wet last year with a couple of starts, but Jack Abraham is a redshirt senior, a guy with experience, and he looked really good in their spring game. Abraham has the arm, experience, and the leadership to be the starting quarterback, and I do believe he could be even better than 12th by the time the season's over. At number 11, I have Harrison Bailey from Tennessee. Right now, there probably is a quarterback competition between Joe Milton, Harrison Bailey, and Virginia Tech transfer Hendon Hooker, but as of right now, I do believe that Bailey will win the starting job. If not, by the end of the year, he will be the starter. I do have him ranked over some guys who have played a little bit more, but Bailey's ceiling is extremely high, as he was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2020 at one point, and Jeremy Pruitt was just absolutely stupid for not playing him last year. Josh Heupel has been good with quarterbacks, as he coached Landry Jones at Oklahoma, Drew Lock at Missouri, and both Dylan Gabriel and Mackenzie Milton at UCF. If his track record continues, Harrison Bailey is more of a pro-style quarterback, so he should have a good year passing the ball. Bailey has all the arm talent and the tools necessary to be a star quarterback in the SEC, and I think it's only a matter of time before he is the future of the program and can help lead a resurgence of the Volunteers program. Last year, he made his first career start against the Florida Gators, where he did actually lead them to score a touchdown, but as I said earlier, Jeremy Pruitt was an absolute fool for not starting him last year, as for some reason, he thought Jarrett Garantano was going to lead the Volunteers to an SEC East crown. If Bailey had actually started every game last year, I think he'd be a little bit more ready for the 2021 season, and he'd be the clear bona fide starter. I really like Bailey, and I think he'll be a star in the future. At number 10, I'm probably going to surprise a lot of people, as I have Vanderbilt's Ken Seals. I know the Commodores program isn't exactly the best in the business, but this is about the best quarterbacks, and so far Seals has actually been pretty good. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school and actually had interest from the Texas Longhorns at one point, but he decided to commit to the Commodores where he would start immediately. He'd start 9 games as a true freshman and became the 3rd true freshman quarterback to start a season opener in SEC football history. He has the Vanderbilt freshman record for completion percentage and became the 3rd Vanderbilt freshman to throw for over 1,000 yards in a year. He finished the season with 12 touchdowns and 10 picks, which did show his inconsistencies, but he also showed the ability to actually score for Vanderbilt. He's already tied for 3rd in Vanderbilt history for the most 300-yard passing games, and was the 2nd best true freshman quarterback nationally in terms of passing yards, completions, attempts, and completion percentage. Obviously, the Commodores did not have a very good year, but as a true freshman 3-star recruit, Seals really proved the world wrong, and really could be a quarterback that can change the narrative around Vanderbilt football, and I'm really high on Seals. At number 9, I have Joey Gatewood. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school and would originally take his talents to Auburn. From there, he would join a crowded quarterback room that included Bo Nix, Malik Willis, and Gatewood himself. Who would have thought that Willis would become the best of the 3, but Gatewood would play very sparingly as a freshman, as he would only appear in their Music City Bowl win against Purdue. As a redshirt freshman in 2019, he'd have a total of 148 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, and he completed 5 of his 7 passes for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. He obviously looked pretty solid, but it was Bo Nix's job. He knew that and decided to enter his name in the transfer portal, or he would go to Kentucky. Terry Wilson originally started, but Gatewood would eventually see time for the Kentucky Wildcats in 2020. So now you may be asking why a guy who played in 6 games last year and didn't even record a single touchdown is ranked as the 9th best quarterback in the SEC. Well, I do believe it's because of his potential. He showed a lot of flash at Auburn and has both the arm talent and the running talent to be a good dual threat quarterback. He will now finally be the bona fide starter as Terry Wilson is at New Mexico, and I think an offseason with first team reps and normalcy will help Gatewood develop. A lot of people predict that Kentucky could be a dark horse team in the SEC, and I do believe that Gatewood will break out in 2021. He could either be higher at this spot or the worst quarterback in the SEC in a few months from now, but as of right now, I have him at number 9. And feel free to let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section. One spot ahead of Gatewood, we have the guy who would beat him out, Bo Nix. Son of a former Tiger legend, Bo Nix always wanted to be an Auburn quarterback, and he became a star in high school. He eventually blossomed into a 5-star recruit and would obviously take his talents to Auburn. He started as a true freshman, and in his first game against Oregon, he threw a game-winning touchdown to Seth Williams. From there, he'd go on to become the SEC Freshman of the Year, as he threw for 2,542 yards and 16 touchdowns, which were all Auburn freshman records. He also had 7 touchdowns on the ground, and the hype for him going into 2020 was unreal. Unfortunately, I think he took a step back, as he did not develop into the kind of quarterback that many probably expected. He only threw for 2,415 yards and 12 touchdowns with 7 interceptions. He could have easily lost in the game against Arkansas with that poorly called fumble. Sorry, Arkansas fans. And I'm just not super high on Nix going into 2021. Brian Harsin wants more of a pro-style quarterback, and that might be why they took TJ Finley from LSU. It is a very intriguing quarterback situation, as Finley has repeatedly said that he was not going to go to Auburn unless he thought he could start. This also shows that Harsin does not have full 100% faith that Nix can be his starting quarterback, so I do believe there will be a battle between the two. I think Nix will win in the end, and hopefully he has a breakout junior campaign and proves me wrong. At number 7, I am banking on the potential of Haynes King, as I think he'll be a great quarterback for Texas A&M. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school and would eventually commit to Jimbo Fisher and the A&M Aggies. Right now, he's technically in a battle with Zach Calzada, but for the most part, most people think that Haynes King will win the job. He played in 2 games in 2020 and made his first career action against Alabama. Jimbo Fisher is great at developing quarterbacks, and I believe that Haynes King will be one of the best gunslingers in the conference next year. The time has finally come for Emory Jones. He'll be the next great Florida quarterback in my opinion, and he has the highest ceiling of any quarterback on this list in my opinion. He was a big-time recruit coming out of high school and actually originally committed to Ohio State. He'd later open his recruitment And after Dan Mullen lost Matt Corral, Jones committed to the Gators over the likes of Florida State and Alabama. In 2018, he'd get his first in-game action as he actually threw for 125 yards and 2 scores against Idaho, and would see some time in their bowl game win over Michigan. In 2019, he'd be the primary backup to Kyle Trask after Franks went down, and he'd pass for 267 yards and 3 touchdowns, while also rushing for 224 yards and 4 touchdowns. With the emergence of Trask in 2020, Jones once again had to patiently wait and be a backup. He would throw for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns, while having 2 more rushing touchdowns on the ground. After being a backup for 3 years, it is finally time for the Gators to unleash Emory Jones. He's a really talented player who has a great arm and can run the ball. He's super confident, he's been in the system for a while, and his ceiling is ultra high. He's 6'2", extremely quick, and has been working and waiting for his time to come, and I do believe he will be the starter over Carlos Del Rio and Anthony Richardson. Some people have Emory Jones as a first-round pick on their big boards for 2022, and as I said earlier, he has the highest ceiling of any quarterback in the SEC in my opinion. Whether you love or hate Dan Mullen, he's been pretty good at developing quarterbacks, and I think Emory Jones is the next one up, and he could find himself much higher on this list, but because he hasn't done a whole lot so far, and it's really boom or bust, he's going to be at number 6. At number 5, I have Myles Brennan. I know right now the battle is likely between Max Johnson and Myles Brennan, and by the end of the year there probably will be quarterbacks that are better than Brennan or Johnson, but because of his track record, I have Brennan at number 5. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school and patiently waited his turn to start. He was the backup to Joe Burrow before he was finally unleashed in 2020. When he was unleashed, he threw for 345 yards and 3 touchdowns in his first start against Mississippi State, and then the following week against Vanderbilt, he threw for 337 yards and 4 touchdowns. Against Missouri, he was having a spectacular game as he had thrown for 430 yards and 4 touchdowns before he would get injured and then be lost for the season. I know a lot of people are going to question Brennan being this high on the list, but in terms of players who are returning, there aren't many better than Brennan. The injury could affect it, and Max Johnson could potentially beat him out, but the guy has a lot of experience, he's a leader, and he threw for over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns in only 2.5 games. We could maybe see him develop into one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, maybe he will regress, or maybe he won't even start. But as of right now, with his past, I have Brennan at number 5. Obviously, in most years, Connor Bazelak would probably not be number 4 in the SEC, and maybe he isn't as good as I think. There are so many new faces at the quarterback position going into 2021, and a lot of the guys below him really didn't do a whole lot. You could argue that Brennan, Jones, and Nix should be ahead of Bazelak, but Brennan was injured, Jones has barely played, and Nix took a step off in 2020. Bazelak was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school and chose to take his talents to Missouri. He wouldn't play until the final game of 2019, as he would start against Arkansas, where he would tear his ACL. He'd work and rehab tirelessly though, and look good against Bama. He'd eventually replace Sean Robinson as the starter, and against LSU, he broke numerous freshman records and showed the kind of talent he had. In that game, he threw for 406 yards and 4 touchdowns without a single pick and completed 85% of his passes. I know Bo Pelini's LSU defense was pretty bad in retrospect, but he showed the kind of talent he had, and he threw for over 200 yards in every single game the rest of the year, except against Georgia. Elijah Drinkwitz has been really good with quarterbacks in the past, and I do believe that he will develop Bazelak into a star player. As a Mizzou fan, I've watched a lot of him and read up on him a lot, and some people say he could be better than Drew Lock when he leaves Missouri, and maybe having him at number 4 is a reach, but I have my reasons, and I do think that Missouri will be a good team in 2020, and he could break out into one of the better players in the conference. At number 3, I have another pick that people are likely going to argue with, as I don't have Bryce Young as a top 2 quarterback. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and went to the prestigious Mater Dei High School. Like all Mater Dei alums, many thought he would go to USC, and he actually originally committed there. He would later reopen his recruitment though, and commit to Nick Saban in the Alabama Crimson Tide. There was wide speculation that he would be a starter as a true freshman last year, but as we all know, Steve Sark went with Mac Jones, and it paid off. Young would still come off the bench though and play in 9 games. He threw for 156 yards and 1 touchdown. He had an impressive spring game where it looks like he will now beat out both Paul Tyson and Jalen Milroe for the starting job. Bill O'Brien has a great track record with quarterbacks as well, and I do believe that Bryce Young will be a really good player and could potentially be a Heisman Trophy candidate. As of right now though, he's only thrown for 1 touchdown in his career, and it's hard to say he's going to be better than the 2 guys above the list at this very moment. I mentioned his name earlier on in the video. As with Matt Corral flipping, it led Emory Jones to becoming a Gator. In case you didn't know, Matt Corral was an absolute high school football star as he came from Ventura, California. He threw for over 11,000 yards and 123 touchdowns as a 4-year starter and would originally commit to the Florida Gators. At the time, there was a problem though, as Jim McElwain was fired and Dan Mullen's new staff would come in. Mullen and his staff started recruiting Justin Fields as well, and many like to speculate that that did not sit well with Corral. Corral actually said, quote, "It's not the fact that they went to visit other quarterbacks, but it was the fact that I didn't get hit up or a call 3 weeks into it. I know people will say, oh, they didn't want you. That's not true. I was going to sign the papers that day, and they told me I was the guy. So I got the feeling that I was just the guy only because nobody else wanted to be, and I was just the backup. It doesn't really matter to me, but it was about where I genuinely wanted to be, and where I was genuinely wanted." From there, head coach Matt Luke at Ole Miss would ramp up his recruitment of Corral and showed that he wanted him to be his quarterback. They did have John Rice Plumlee as well, but eventually Corral would flip to the Rebels, and it would pay off. As a freshman, he would redshirt, but he would play in 4 games. He had a total of 2 touchdowns on the ground and 2 touchdowns through the air in 2018, and in 2019 he would battle it out with John Rice Plumlee for the starting job. He'd throw for 1,362 yards and 6 touchdowns, and would establish himself as the starter moving forwards for the program. In 2020, he would absolutely break out under new head coach Lane Kiffin, as he would throw for 3,337 yards and 29 touchdowns, while becoming a 3rd-team All-SEC selection and a Manning Award finalist. Going into 2021, some say he is the best quarterback in the SEC and could be a first-round NFL draft pick next year. I really like Corral, and I'm excited to see what he can do for Ole Miss, and I really do hope he becomes a big-time NFL draft prospect, as that would be really cool. His story is extremely interesting, and I'm definitely going to do a video about him soon, and what would have happened if he had stayed at Florida. Before we get into number 1, be sure to quickly let me know what you think of today's list, subscribe if you love college football content, and give the video a like so more people can see today's video, and it'll help the channel grow. At number 1, I obviously have JT Daniels. I am higher on him than most, but when he came in, the offense really changed last year. Daniels was a 5-star recruit coming out of Mater Dei High School and reclassified into the 2018 recruiting class. He signed with USC, where he had an up-and-down freshman year. In the first game of his sophomore year though, he ended up having a devastating knee injury, and Keaton Slovis took his job. He was still recovering, but he chose to transfer to Georgia, where he would miss the first few games because he just wasn't quite there yet. When he came in, he played really well though. In just 4 games, he threw for 1,231 yards and 10 touchdowns, and he showed he is the quarterback Kirby Smart needs to eventually make it to the playoff and hopefully win a title. I love JT Daniels' swag and attitude, and losing George Pickens hurts a lot, but I really think he's going to be a great player. I think he'll be a first-round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, and he could lead Georgia to the national title game this year. What do you guys think though? Let me know your thoughts on my list, which quarterbacks I got wrong and which quarterbacks I got right. If there's a player that you think will start that I did not name, be sure to let me know down in the comment section as well. Let me know your favorite SEC school and your prediction for your team's season, and what conference or player or topic I should do next. Be sure to subscribe if you have not already, hit that like button if you want to support today's video, leave a suggestion for what I should do next, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about 25 instant impact transfer quarterbacks. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.